Hello and welcome to lecture 1C, Reducing Anxiety. As you can probably recall from when I went over the syllabus, reducing anxiety is a big part of this course. I think that many times, unfortunately, at other schools or maybe in years past, this idea of the nervousness of students when speaking in front of people was not really taken into account. It was sort of a sink or swim type of situation. I know that when I took public speaking when I was in college, it was quite traditional. The instructor was rather old school. So we all sat in rows and there was no mention of any sort of emotional component to speaking in front of people. And we would just sit there and we would listen to other people talk. And then when it was our turn, we got up in front of the class and we spoke. Really sort of a middle school type of mentality. It really reminded me of middle school. However, I think public speaking is really necessary, even if it doesn't take into account people's anxiety, because they do have to get used to it. However, I don't teach that way, and this college certainly does not believe in ignoring this aspect of speaking in front of people. So we're going to spend you're going to spend this lecture listening to me talking about reducing anxiety. Um, there is a difference between a fear of public speaking and a phobia of public speaking. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. If you have to interview for a job and you don't have a lot of qualifications, but you really need the job, it's natural for you to be nervous when speaking in front of people in said interview. That's perfectly natural. If something is really important to you and you're worried about how it will come off, it's natural to be nervous speaking in front of people. Okay, and that's a fear. Okay, phobia is a little different. Okay, now if I were to ask you what's the difference between a fear and a phobia, you might understand what I'm talking about. So a fear is rational, a phobia is irrational. Okay, so you can't say, when people say like I'm afraid of heights, what they usually mean is I have a phobia of heights. So if you're dangling from a cliff and you're afraid because you're so high up, that's a fear of heights in that moment. Okay. But if you are nervous about, I don't know, being in a building where logically you know that you're safe, even though you're high up, then one might argue that that's a phobia. You see what I mean? If you're being chased by a lion, you're going to have a natural fear of that lions at that moment. However, if you're so scared of lions that you can't even hold a stuffed animal lion, then well, that's a phobia. It's irrational. So a lot of people that say I'm afraid of public speaking, I'm afraid of public speaking, they actually mean that they have a phobia of public speaking. So 90% of the time when they say I have a fear of public speaking, they have a phobia of public speaking. And the problem with the phobia, as I mentioned, is it's irrational. So I've had students who, I've had very small classes. I've had classes with only 4 or 5 students in them. And in these classes, what happens is even though the student has been in the class the entire time and they know that if they do their speech, they're going to get a good grade if they just do what they're supposed to, they're still nervous speaking in front of a few people. And I said, that's a phobia. See, that's a phobia. That's not rational anymore. Okay? Now, phobias can be overcome. But the trick is that you cannot use rational thought to combat what is an irrational fear. You see, it doesn't work like that. Because the rational thought will pass right through irrational fear because they're two separate things. It has no effect on it. Irrational thought, irrational phobia is completely immune to any sort of rational way to sort of talk yourself out of that phobia. Now, A lot of people have like phobias of germs. Now, if you're afraid of something in terms of your health, that might be quite rational. Okay, so let's say the vaccines are coming into play. A lot of people are afraid of taking the vaccine. So you're afraid of getting the vaccine, and you read up on it, and you read up that I don't know that it's safe, then the fear goes away. Okay, because that was rational. Your fear of vaccines might be rational at first. Okay, but what happens is if you read time and time again, and it's proven, and I don't know, time goes by, it's proven that the vaccines are safe. I mean, think about how many vaccines people get in general. Okay, and then after that time, let's say it turns out to be safe, and you're still afraid, you still have this fear that it's doing something to your body, then it's a phobia. Okay, so I would fathom that people usually have a phobia of public speaking, right? Now, again, I know I'm going to say this 100 times, I'll say it 100 more. Traditional classroom, what I'll do is I'll go around and I'll have people write on a scale of 1 to 10 on a sheet of paper how nervous they are when speaking in front of people. Even worked with a synchronous class. I was thinking about creating a survey where we could go and we could see, but I didn't think it was necessary. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous you are speaking in front of people. Okay, so we'll do a couple of things. The first thing we'll do is, let's say this is a traditional classroom, and you know anyone in class, and I asked you to stand up and to speak in front of people and tell us a little bit about yourself. 10, you're so nervous that you're going to pass out. 1, you're so relaxed you're going to fall asleep. Where do you stand? Okay, just think about that and write that down. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about when it comes time for you to record your speeches for your class. How nervous will you be when recording that speech? A scale of 1 to 10, right? Is it higher? Is it lower? Okay. And this varies. Sometimes I'll be in classes where it's pretty much average. It averages out to 5. Sometimes I'll be in classes in which we have tons of 1s and 2s and 3s, not nervous at all. And then sometimes most of the time I'll be in class where it really is on the higher end. Usually I'll get at least a few 10s. Every semester, there's no semester where I don't get any 10s. It just doesn't happen. Right? I'll get some 8s and 7s and 9s. Someone will be a wise guy and put like a 6.5. But you're not alone. I know that doesn't necessarily help your anxiety. So I'm going to talk about some strategies that will help reduce your anxiety. But if you truly want to get over this anxiety you have speaking in front of people, you must take a leap of faith. You must trust me that I know what I'm talking about, because everything that we're going to discuss in terms of getting over your fear of public speaking is counterintuitive. Now, what do I mean by counterintuitive? Well, if any of you drive and you're going down a road and you slip on the ice and you start losing control of the car, you're about to go off the road, your instinct is to turn away from, oh, I'm going off the road, I better turn. But you know, if you drive, especially in this winter weather, that if you steer away from where you're sliding, you're going to spin out. So what you do is you actually go in the direction in which you are losing control of the car. So you turn the wheel towards off the road, and then you will gain control of the car. All right. So everything I'm going to say, at least most of it, is counterintuitive, but you got to trust me. Okay. You have to think about it. You really have to do the work if you want to get over this phobia. And also you have to ascertain whether or not it's a fear or a phobia. I don't have a phobia of public speaking. But I sometimes do have a fear of speaking in front of people, but it's not the fear of speaking in front of people in general. It's because there's something that is at stake, right? But in terms of just talking in front of people, I feel completely comfortable. And actually, in real space, I think I mentioned this in some previous lecture. I'm absolutely one. I have to bring up the energy, even when I'm interviewing for a job. Uh, in a lot of cases, I have to bring up the energy because I'm so relaxed. I have such a little. Now, I do have phobias, but public speaking is not one of them. I think it'd be ridiculous if I taught public speaking and I had a phobia of public speaking. Now, don't feel bad if you have a phobia of public speaking and someone you know doesn't, because everyone has a phobia. I believe that if they don't, they are lying. I have a phobia of heights. Okay. So I remember I was going on a roller coaster. I took a family member on a roller coaster when she was a little girl, and she wanted me to go on with her, and I didn't want to go on. Okay. I didn't want to go on because I had a phobia of heights. And I remember being nervous. You know how the roller coaster goes up and you're sitting there and you're going higher. We're going above the trees. I can see the river. I can see the landscape. And I was nervous, and I was trying to make myself not nervous by saying to myself, you're perfectly safe in this roller coaster. You are probably 1,000 times safer in this roller coaster than you were in the car driving here. But you see, it's irrational. It was an irrational phobia. And I realized that that doesn't work. Trying to talk yourself out of a phobia does not work. If it did, it wouldn't be phobias, right? So I want you to think about that. Think about that. If you don't know, there are people, I've heard all sorts of phobias. Everyone has a phobia of something: snakes, clowns, heights, spiders, deep water, death, whatever it is, someone has a phobia. So just relax. Public speaking is one of the most common phobia. Actually, I think it is the most common phobia. It's higher than death. I think public speaking is one. Death is two. Right. So when you think about that, well, that's out there. That's pretty crazy. So you can ask yourself why you're afraid, why you have this, why you're scared, why you have a phobia when speaking in front of people, and there are a lot of reasons. Some people think it's ingrained in our DNA. So, for instance, 40,000 years ago, you're hunting a woolly mammoth, right? You turn a corner, all of a sudden there are 50 strangers staring at you. It's threatening. So some people think that's why we have this phobia. The same reason people have a phobia of snakes and spiders, because 40,000 years ago, if a snake came along, it could be dangerous, or a spider could be venomous, or whatever the case. It really doesn't matter why you have this phobia. Sometimes there might be no reason for it. I know that sometimes when people say they have a phobia, there's like, I'm afraid of frogs because when I was a little kid, I fell into a pond and all these frogs swam around me and were poking me with their sliminess, and it sort of upset me. I mean, it doesn't matter. All right. I'll tell you this though. One of the reasons that people do have a phobia of public speaking is because they're focused on themselves. Okay. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid of that they're being stared at. They're afraid of it being judged. And basically, they're egocentric. It's all about themselves. So a lot of this anxiety, a lot of the anxiety reduction techniques that I'm going to talk about today, not today, whatever day it is for you, see how used to I am of in being in regular space, regular time. But whenever you're watching this, in this lecture, what I'm going to talk about is this anxiety reduction techniques, and most of them, if not all of them, have to do with taking focus away from yourself and putting it on something else to combat egocentrism, which means that you're thinking about yourself in that particular moment. Okay. One of the ways that you can combat this egocentrism to take the focus away from yourself is to analyze the audience, to look at the audience and say, what are they about? Are they into this? Right? So you look at them. Okay. A lot of people, what they try to do is they avoid eye contact. Now, I don't want to be nervous, so avoid eye contact, but you see, that's not working on the phobia. That's just sort of avoiding it. So what you do is you look at people, see if they're interested. If they're a little bored, okay, you bring up the energy a little bit. Of course, this just works with traditional types of public speaking and not online asynchronous, but it's something that you can think about in the future. Look at people. I mean, it's easy to misinterpret their reactions, but it also helps to interpret the reactions. Remember, some people, you're never going to get their interest. They're always going to cross their arms and say, nope, 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 nope. No matter what you do, they're not going to be interested. They're going to be on their phone. They just don't care. But for the people who do care, look at them. Do they seem a little bored? If so, bring up the energy. They seem okay. If so, they seem engaged. Okay, well, we'll, mellow out a little bit. You can take it easy for a few moments. But you have to think about keeping the interest of the audience. Think about them. Okay. Again, counterintuitive. Oh, I'm nervous. I'm not going to look at the audience. No. Focus on the audience. Think about what they're saying. It takes focus away from yourself and the worry and the phobia that you have. Okay. Now, if some of these seem strange to you, if some of these seem as if, no, it's not going to work for me, well, that is the one that you need to use. Okay. Diffusing energy. This is going to be difficult online, but diffusing energy, you have too much physical energy if you're nervous. So a lot of times when you're speaking in front of people, you get this fight or flight sort of situation going on. You're very nervous and you want to run or you want to fight. It's very primal. Think about those 50 strangers who you encounter on your woolly mammoth hunt, right? They're staring at you, all right? They're threatening because they're just looking at you. Who knows what they're going to do? You're going to get prepared for a fight or prepare for a flight. Okay, so you have all this energy, and you're required, right? This is not prehistoric times. You're required to sit there, stand there very civilly, and read off your notes. Okay, you have too much physical energy. So what you do is you sort of expend some of that nervous energy. Okay, that physical energy. You walk around the room. You raise your voice. You put more of a performance into it. Now you can see I'm doing it right now. What I'm doing right now is I'm making this more of a physical performance. I'm more emphatic with my gestures. I'm louder with my voice. I'm making it more of just a bigger. I'm making it bigger. I'm making what I'm doing much larger. Okay? And if I were in a classroom, I would walk around and I look at people, make it a performance, make it a show. Okay, because what happens is, again, people they don't want to listen. They're afraid to take that leap of faith, and they say, "Well, I'm nervous, so I'm just going to stand very still." What happens is you see people shake. I've seen people shake because they're not expending that physical energy. Okay, they're like in a little ball, and they're shaking. Move around, make it big. In addition to having too much physical energy, you also have too much mental energy. Now, a lot of the books, this is one of the reasons I don't require a text, because a lot of them are very old school, and they say at every moment you need to spend 100% of your concentration on what it is you said, what you're saying, what you're going to say. I say nonsense. I say that you have so much mental energy that it's possible to think about many things at once. And if you're thinking about a few things at once, okay, again, it's diffusing that anxiety because you have too much mental energy. And what you do is you sort of spread out that energy, spread out that anxiety. So you're thinking about other things as you're speaking to other people. Right now, I'm doing it as I speak to you. As I speak to you, I'm thinking about a couple of things. I'm thinking about Saturday Night Live being on tonight. I'm thinking about I'm going to be talking to someone after this lecture, And I'm also thinking about dogs because I like dogs. So I've been thinking about all those things as I've been speaking to you. It's not that I'm not focused on what it is that I'm saying. It's because I have some excess mental energy because I've been doing this. I'm not because I'm nervous, but because I've been doing this for so long that I'm able to think about other things. I'm able to multitask in my mind. And I might come back right now and focus on it. The other thing is, we don't talk about this too much because we're not doing improvisation in this class, but sometimes if you focus too much on what it is you're going to say, that you actually get jinxed and that makes you nervous. So what sometimes you can do is you can spread out that mental energy, and that helps you not only speak extemporaneously, but also can help you reduce the anxiety. So just to recap, although we don't really need to recap because you can rewind. Uh, think about the audience, take focus away from yourself by analyzing the audience. We will talk about analyzing the audience in lecture 2A, I believe. Okay. Diffusing energy, move around as much as you can, diffuse some of that physical energy caused by anxiety, and use the distractive technique. Think about other things when you're speaking to an audience. You can think about subjects that have nothing to do with the speaking. You can think about right now. So what I'm doing right now is I just realized, if you know this, my neck hurts because of the way I'm trying to line up the camera. I'll have to fix that. But I'm thinking about parts of my body. I just thought about my feet and they seem kind of cold. And I'm going to, my muscles are a little sore in this chair. So I'm going to adjust a little bit. But you can think about all those things when you're speaking and not miss a beat because, again, you have a lot of mental energy, especially if you're anxious. Your brain is supercharged. Right now, I have a lot of mental energy because I've done this before, as I said. So those are the first three sort of techniques that you can use to reduce anxiety if you so desire. Another technique, which is a little different, we're getting a little into a different territory here, is exposure. So with exposure, and you might have heard this before, it's used a lot if people have are germophobic, if they have a fear of disease and getting sick. What you do is you gradually introduce yourself to whatever it is you have a phobia of until you become acclimated to and to accustomed to it. So for instance, if someone has a germophobia, I have a friend who is a therapist, and what she does is she works with people who have such phobias. And there's a person that she worked with who had a phobia of using a public bathroom. Okay, she couldn't do it. Now the problem is you're out and you have to use a public bathroom, right? And you don't, and you wait until you get home. Well, you might have some problems, with your kidneys or whatever. I'm not a doctor, but you get the idea. So she couldn't have this. So what she did is she gradually, she made this person look in the bathroom. Sometimes she put like little drops of fake blood on a toilet, and so on and so forth. If people are afraid of garbage, or they're afraid of germs, they will have someone eventually eating out of garbage. Okay. Or one thing that people do is if you're a germophobic, they'll make you drop a piece of food on the floor and then pick it up off the floor and eat it. Now that might seem gross to a lot of you, but remember, this phobia of germs is so bad in these people that they can no longer function. So they have to keep on pushing themselves to greater and greater, more extreme forms of exposure in order to alleviate their phobia. Now, how does that apply to public speaking? Well, again, for the 100th time, it's difficult because this is not a traditional course, but what I would have people do is I would have people just talk in class and then do exercises in class and gradually build up this fear that they have. Gradually build up this a resistance to this phobia by exposing themselves gradually and gradually. It's like if you're afraid of spiders. You look at pictures of spiders, then you look at video of spiders, then you're across the room from the spider, then you're above a spider that is in like a little cage or a little glass jar. Then you got to touch the spider quickly. Then you got to let the spider crawl on your hand, and then it's got to crawl on your face, and then so on and so forth. And then supposedly it works. Now, for you, what I would do in order, if you have a phobia of recording these presentations, and you might say, well, it's just recording a presentation, but I can tell you it almost is worse because you're worried about, you have to acclimate yourself to it. So what I would do is, I don't know, maybe start just recording stuff in general, recording performances of you, I don't know, just doing something silly and posting it on YouTube, and just letting people who want to see it see. I mean, just maybe your friends, okay? Because that might give you some anxiety too. Not only recording the video, but the idea that your fellow students who you might not know will be watching this. So essentially strangers will be watching this. It is difficult because it's not a traditional classroom and you can't get to know these people. So yes, strangers will be watching this. So what I might do if I were you, in order to implement this exposure therapy, is to maybe record yourself doing something silly on YouTube, and then letting some of your friends see it, and then maybe people see it, maybe gradually get sillier and sillier. Then maybe putting it on YouTube for people to come across it randomly. I don't require any of this, of course, but it's something to think about. Okay, something to think about. We're in a whole new world here in terms of public speaking, in terms of recording it, in terms of posting it, and who knows what will give you anxiety. Feel free to communicate. Remember, that is a requirement. Okay, YouTube is going to guarantee that everyone can watch it, and especially me, because remember, I'm going to be evaluating it, I'm going to be grading it, so it's got to be something that I can see. If you have a format, I don't know if it comes QuickTime or Google Docs or whatever, and you don't, I might not have the format. YouTube, I'm always guaranteed. By the way, when you post the YouTube videos, you put it as an unlisted link, all right? So just please keep that in mind. That's exposure. There are some critics of exposure that it doesn't work. So for instance, if you are so afraid of a certain thing that it's causing you terrible anxiety that you can't even begin the exposure exercises, then that's a different story altogether. But they do tend to work. The other thing that you can do in terms of exposure is you don't necessarily have to, actually carry out the exposure exercise. You can do mental exercises. It's called negative thinking, which is another anxiety reduction technique. Negative thinking is what you do is you think of the worst thing that could possibly happen. And so the worst thing that could possibly happen when someone's giving a speech in front of people is they could throw up, they could pass out. I've seen it all. And you just say to yourself over and over again, that's going to happen. And you're like, I want it to happen. I hope it happens. And then what happens is that eventually you talk about it so much, okay, you think about it so much that it doesn't really it doesn't really affect you anymore. You don't really care anymore, if that makes sense. It's just you are just like, oh, whatever, because you become so accustomed to this negative talk over and over again. Again, it seems counterintuitive. You might think, well, I've got to talk, I got to be positive. I got to, say I'm going to do a good job. But remember, if it's a phobia, that's not going to work. If you imagine yourself giving the perfect speech and you have a phobia, then there's this disconnect, this disparate result from what you're trying to imagine and what the phobia is sort of telling you. So positive motivation, telling yourself you're going to do, I mean, if that works for you, then by all means do it. But for me, that never worked because my phobias were irrational and I couldn't sort of talk my way out of it. Something else that might seem counterintuitive, again, is sort of like the distraction technique, is remember that you can imagine things around you. I'm not talking about thoughts, I'm talking about visually trying to bring into your mind's eye things around you. I call it cute puppies because one of the theories is that conflicting emotions can exist. So the anxiety about giving a speech is terrible. I mean, that's terrible emotion. And cuddling a puppy or a dog, that's a wonderful feeling. So the idea is that this wonderful feeling pushes out the anxiety. So you imagine cute puppies or kittens or whatever is like, I'm doing it right now. I'm imagining these puppies, like one's on the computer, one's on the printer. I've had students who have actually brought in dogs, and I'm telling you, all people had to do was they just had to look at the dog, and a lot of their anxiety sort of melted away. So that's something that you can think about. There's another technique that you can use, and basically what it is you just think about how big the universe is and how insignificant this moment is, and that tends to help. You basically say, well, I'm not really as significant. Uh, Once the anxiety passes, you can go back to, feeling great about yourselves. But you just think about the universe, how big it is, the sun, the light years, it would take 4 years at the speed of light to go to the nearest star other than our sun. So it's just think about the vastness of the universe and how insignificant this moment is, and it tends to help. There's something else that you can do. You can do something called alternative visualization. And that is when you imagine yourself as someone else giving the speech. So I don't know, you might imagine yourself as Trump or Joe Biden or Barack Obama, and you copy their mannerisms and you speak as if you are that particular person. And again, what that does, it takes focus away from yourself by pretending to be this other individual. Now, finally, in terms of anxiety reduction, I feel as if we've rushed through this a little bit, but again, you can practice this at your leisure. You have to practice. A lot of people, what they do is they avoid anxiety and they don't practice because it invokes, this fear, the phobia in them. So what they do is they might do a lot of work. They might write their speech out. They might do a lot of research, everything. But in terms of actually practicing, they don't do it. And there actually was a study done that people who prepare their speeches, in terms of writing them out and cross, they actually have higher rates of phobia, and they are practicing avoiding behavior. So by work, they're sort of procrastinating by working on the speech so much and not practicing actually giving the speech. And again, you can practice, I don't know, practice in front of your cat or your dog, and then move on, move up, because although no one's looking at you, when you're recording, you're always aware of that camera eye, that sort of unforgiving camera eye that gives you no feedback while you're speaking. I don't know if it's easier. I don't know if it's harder. Time will tell, and maybe you can tell me what it's like. Remember, you can always email me. You can always communicate with me. I welcome that as much as possible. That's what I'm here for. Because again, I can't help you in real time. Okay. So when you speak, when you're recording your speeches, don't panic. Remember, you can always start over. Okay. Don't get into that habit though of just starting, try to let it go for a while. The great thing about this is that if you give a speech and you record it and you don't like it, you can do it again and no one's going to know, right? It's kind of amazing. The way this works is kind of interesting. There's no live performance, but just hang in there. I'll admit I was a bit apprehensive when I first started doing this. This is the first time in my life that I've done this. I've done synchronous teaching, but I don't think I've ever pre-recorded something to be put in an asynchronous environment. But I can tell you just already, I've been practicing it. This is my third lecture. I was a bit apprehensive. I didn't have a fear of public speak because this is a little different. I had a bit of anxiety. I was afraid that I would have to start over. And you might see that the first one is a bit rough, and I'm getting a little better now that I'm accustomed to this impersonal robot lens staring at me, this tiny little circle that I have to look at. Maybe my speeches, my lectures are a bit smoother now. I don't know. You can tell me. I know my first lecture was a bit rough, but what I was about to say to you was don't apologize. I'm not practicing what I preach. Try not to apologize so much. A lot of times when people are nervous, they want to lower expectations. So they say, listen, I'm very nervous, so I'm sorry, this isn't going to be very good. Why would you say that? All right. You got to focus on the audience. If it's not very good, they'll be the judge of that. You don't sell a car and say this car is a piece of garbage, buy it, right? You don't want to do that. So don't apologize. Don't show your cards. don't tell me that you didn't prepare for it, okay? Why set that up in people's minds? But that's a really bad habit that people have, is they freak out and they don't have that sort of uh, confidence. And if you don't have that confidence, just fake it. Because if you're in an interview situation, for example, and you admit that you're nervous, you might as well say, please don't give me this job. I don't want it. You have to fake it. You can't show your cards. You can't let people know that you're nervous or you don't know what you're doing. Don't do that. Don't do that in an interview. Don't, if you go on a date with someone, don't do that. Okay. You have to resist the temptation to do that. Okay. Even though I might be a hypocrite because I think I might have done that, but you don't do that. Okay. All right. So remember to look for the reflective essay, follow the criteria. I hope that you'll have a lot to write about when you have concluded watching these lectures. And please email with any questions, and I hope you are enjoying this class so far. I know it's very different for us, so hang in there. All right. Well, that concludes this lecture, Lecture 1C. And again, practice those techniques, practice those anxiety reduction techniques if you find yourself experiencing anxiety. Goodbye.